thank you, Senator Sessions, for enlightening us on this budget that you've been doing all day on the floor. I wanted to give some perspective to what we're debating here, because I think sometimes those of us who work in this building come to believe that Washington, D.C. and government is the center of the universe, or even the center of people's lives, and it's not. All of the stuff that we're talking about here on the floor, not just today, but every day, the reason why it's relevant is how it impacts the lives of real people all over the country. What impact does this have on people's lives? Ultimately, I know it's cliche-ish to say this, but it also happens to be very true. We are sent here to work for people, and we are sent to work here for the people that elected us from the states that we come from. And so all of the stuff that we're discussing is relevant to the extent that it impacts the lives of real people in our country and in some respects around the world. And when you talk about cutting spending, what matters is the spending that you're cutting and how is it impacting real people, for better or for worse. You talk about raising taxes, those taxes have to be paid by somebody. They're not being paid by some anonymous thing. They're being paid by a person or a business, which is a collection of people. The point is these taxes are being paid. You talk about the debt. The debt is not some, simply just a moral financial obligation. The debt also has to be paid. Someone's going to pay that debt one day. Every penny this government borrows, someone's going to have to pay it back one day. They're going to have to pay it back through higher taxes. And if the debt is too high, they're also going to have to pay it back through less opportunities. So that's why this matters and why this is relevant. It is relevant. We have to view it through the lens of people's lives, of the lives of real people in the real world. Okay? And what do people want in the real world out of their life? It's not that complicated. It's what all of us want. They want a job that pays them enough money so they can have a good standard of living, so they can afford to maybe buy a house and have enough time to spend with their families and leisure activities, maybe take a vacation every year or so. People want that. People want to be able to pursue their dreams. Maybe you have this great idea about a new business you want to start, and you want to live in a country where if that's what you want to do with your life, it's possible. That you can actually do something you love for a living, and they pay you for it. And what everybody wants, no matter where you are in the economic strata, is everyone wants to make sure their kids are better off than themselves. That's not unique to Americans. People all over the world want their kids to be better off than them. That's what they all want. And so that's what this is about. It's about what role can we play and making all of those things more possible in this country. And in fact, the fact that that has been more possible here than anywhere else is what's made us special. So in order to understand what we can do to make that possible, we have to understand how that happens. How does prosperity happen? How does the kind of prosperity we Americans want for ourselves and for our families and for our children, how is that possible? That is also not that complicated. It's largely a function of the private economy. It's largely a function of the private economy. And it's a cycle that's very well understood. Someone has a really good idea for a business, a new business, or growing their existing business. They somehow get access to money, whether it's their own money or money they borrowed or money someone invests through them, and they open this business. There's no guarantee that that business is going to work out, but they are willing to risk it. And the idea works. And all of a sudden, this business that they started all by themselves, out of the spare bedroom of their home, they now have 5 employees. And 5 employees isn't just a number. That's 5 families that are taking home a paycheck. Those are 5 providers, mothers or fathers, that are bringing home opportunities to their children. This is how prosperity is created. This is how every one of us has ever gotten a job, or how our parents got their jobs, either because they or someone else risked it and created a business opportunity that provided them a job. This is how prosperity is created. And when you view prosperity this way, you come to understand that what we need to do here is to make it easier for that to happen and not harder. And government does have an important role to play in our society. It does. For example, we believe in a safety net, not as a way of life, but to help those who cannot help themselves. We are a society that is too prosperous, and quite frankly, as well as that, we are too humane and too compassionate to not take care of those who cannot help themselves. We always have, and we always will. We also need to have a safety net to help those who have failed to get back on their feet and try again. But the safety net was never designed to be a way of life. By the same token, we need to have security. Government plays an important role in our security, our national security for sure, but in combating crimes, in enforcing contracts, and ensuring that the water you drink is clean, the air you breathe is safe. These are important roles for government to play. But the majority of the things that are going to impact prosperity creation in this country do not come from government. They come from the private sector. And the job of our government is to make it easier for that cycle of prosperity that I described to happen. The job of our government is to create an environment where people are encouraged to, and it is easier for them to risk the money they have access to in order to start up a new business or grow an existing business so they can hire more people and create more jobs for others. There's a lot of things that government can do to help create that environment, but there are a few that are being discussed. I want to point to three. The first thing is predictability. What do I mean by predictability? What I mean by that is that when someone decides, I'm going to open up a business, one of the things that encourages them to hire people is that they know what tomorrow is going to look like. They know what the taxes are going to be. They know what the laws are going to be. They know what the economy is going to look like. And so they feel encouraged because they can plan, because they know what tomorrow looks like. Imagine now for a moment, if you are a businessman or a businesswoman and is deciding whether to hire 5 people next year or not. One of the first things you're going to want to know is, am I going to have enough customers to pay their salaries? How much am I going to owe in taxes and electricity and insurance? You want predictability. And that's something hasn't happened from Washington. There hasn't been a budget over the last 4 years out of this chamber. And that creates unpredictability. Now, I'm pleased that there is a budget to debate, and it's an important debate, and I even though we don't agree on everything, I congratulate those who have prepared this budget and bringing this situation up for a vote here on the floor so we can have this debate, a vibrant debate. But part of the problem we have with the budget that's been offered is it doesn't really address the debt. Why does the debt matter? The debt matters. It matters as a moral obligation for sure. It is wrong to hit future Americans and our young people with this kind of debt, but it's having an impact right now. The debt is not something that's hurting us 20 years down the road or 10 years down the road alone. It's hurting us today. Because the problem is that when people look at this economy and they look at this debt and they say there's no plan in place to fix it, there is no serious plan in place to deal with it, they are worried about risking their money and creating jobs in America. Because they believe that unless this debt is solved, we are going to have a financial crisis in this country. They believe that unless this debt is solved, we are going to have dramatic increases in taxes that is not going to make America a good place to do business. And so there are jobs that aren't being created right now because of the fear over the debt and no plan to fix it. And this budget doesn't fix it. This budget does not fix it. So the first thing that we need to do from government to create an environment where private business can grow and create opportunity is predictability. This budget doesn't do that. The second thing is affordability. We all understand we have to pay taxes. How are you going to pay firefighters and police officers? How do we pay our men and women that defend our freedoms around the world? How are the lights on in this building? Of course we have to pay taxes. This is not about paying taxes or not paying taxes. This is about the fact that there's only so much money in the world. And every penny that the government takes in taxes is money that's not available to invest in a private business. Every time you take a tax, what you're doing is you're taking money out of the economy. You have to do that up to some point, because you need a government. But if you do too much of it, then there's not enough money for people to spend at your business. If someone's paying more in taxes, that means they have less money to spend where you work, which means you're going to make less money in tips or in salary, or it may even cost you your job if the taxes are too high. And I'm telling you, we focus on federal taxes here, but these aren't the only taxes people pay. Depending on where you live, you are paying local and state and now federal taxes. You add those up, and there are people in this country that are paying close to half the money they make in taxes. Half the money they make in taxes. How is that good for growing your economy? So that's a problem. And this budget talks about raising taxes, doesn't say how. And that's one of the things I wanted to address. Because I'm telling you right now, you can raise taxes 100% on the richest people in America. You will not solve this debt problem. Some statistics say that if you raise taxes 100% on millionaires, it will pay for about 60 days worth of government. What are you going to do the other 305 days or 304 days of the year? That's a problem. And so what happens when you run out of rich people to raise taxes on, or so-called rich people? You have to raise taxes on people that are not rich. You have to raise taxes on the middle class. That's why I'm going to offer 2 amendments to this budget that I hope will pass. The first amendment says that we're not going to get rid of the mortgage interest deduction to pay for new spending and new programs in government. If you want to talk about the mortgage interest deduction in the context of a tax reform, I'm not sure that's the best idea or a bad idea, but let's have that debate. But if you want to talk about it in the context of we're going to take that money and use it to grow government, we're going to have a problem. Because there are middle-class people in this country that already have it hard enough as it is. They are working twice as hard. They are making half as much. They've paid their mortgage on time every month, even though they're upside down. But because they pay on time, now their bank won't refinance them, and they're stuck, and they're upset, and they have a right to be. And now on top of that, you're going to get rid of their mortgage interest deduction? I'm not claiming that's what's being offered. I'm just saying if no one's going to offer that, let's prevent it now. And I'm offering an amendment that's going to prevent that. Here's another thing. We shouldn't raise taxes on the middle class at all to pay for new government. And I'll offer an amendment that prohibits that as well. So the second thing we need is affordability. No one's saying we don't need to fund government. Of course we do. By the way, the best way to fund government is to grow your economy. If we could grow this economy at 4% a year for the next decade, that'll generate like $3.5 trillion in new revenue. There is no tax increase in the world that can do that. At least no realistic one. My last point on this is, one of the things government can do is help people to help themselves. And in the modern era, there's nothing more important in that regard than education. The world has changed. My parents, when they came here in 1956 from Cuba, they didn't have a lot of skills. My dad didn't really go to school. My mom didn't. And they were able to achieve a middle-class lifestyle in this country as a bartender and a maid. That is almost impossible to do today. That's not anyone's fault. That's just the way the world has changed. Today, you need a certain level of skills because the information technology age has changed everything. The good news is the jobs that are being created, these new middle-class jobs, have an opportunity for a lot more security and fulfillment and higher pay. The bad news is we have a lot of people that don't have the skills for those jobs. We have a skills gap in America that needs to be closed. And that involves education up and down the line. But the one I want to focus on is school choice. I think it is wrong that the only parents in America that cannot send their kids to the school they want are poor parents. I think that is fundamentally wrong. Middle-class parents, they can sacrifice and scrape, and some of them, not all of them, some of them can afford to send their kids to the school of their choice. Rich people can send their kids to any school they want. But a poor parent in America, they're stuck. Envision this for a moment. Envision this for a moment. You are a poor parent. You are a poor single mom or single dad. You're living already in a dangerous neighborhood in substandard housing. And on top of that, you are forced by the government to send your children to a school that's failing. And every year the politicians tell you, we're going to improve these schools. Give us a chance to pour more money in these schools. We're going to turn them around. And I hope they do. But meantime, while they're carrying out this experiment, your kids are turning 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. The clock is running. And you can never have those years back. It is wrong. It is wrong that parents who don't have access to funds cannot send their kids to the school of their choice. It is wrong. And one of the things I want to try to do here at the federal level is replicate what we've done in Florida. And that is create an incentive for people to donate their money to private, not-for-profit scholarship organizations that give scholarships to low-income families so they can send their kids to the school of their parents' choice, not just to the school of the government's choice. And that's important in terms of helping people acquire the skills they need in this new century. Because if we don't close that skills gap, we are going to have a huge opportunity gap in America, one that's already developing. I hope we don't underestimate what's happening out there. You have working-class people in America that are starting to wonder if this is still the place where if you work hard, you can go as far as your talent will take you. They're starting to wonder if this is still the place whether if you work hard, you can leave your children better off than yourselves. You have middle-class families that are starting to wonder who is fighting for them. Who is fighting for them? The people who have made it, big companies, big corporations, they've got lobbyists all over this building standing up for them. They don't want to take anything away from the people that have made it. They see other people always arguing on behalf of government programs to help people that are struggling. Many of those programs are important. They don't want to take that away from them either. But who's fighting for them? Who's fighting for the people that have done it the right way? Who didn't take out mortgages they couldn't afford? Who will take a job even if it pays half as much and requires them to work twice as long? Because they don't want to be dependent on government. Their pride won't allow it. Who is fighting for them? And they're worried about the future. What about the people with the big ideas, the ones that are going to start the next great American company? They're starting to wonder whether America's the place to do it. When they hear some people that basically describe financial success as a wrong. And they start to wonder whether government is an obstacle or an ally in their hopes of opening up their business here. And this is a fundamental problem for us, because this is not an economic debate. This is a debate about our identity as a country. It's important for us to understand what makes America different than the rest of the world, and we are different. And when you're born and raised in this country like I am, it's easy to take this for granted. We shouldn't. It isn't like this everywhere. In most countries, you can only do what your parents did for a living, even today. In most places on earth, you can only go as far as your family went, even today. And this chamber is full of people, and I'm glad to be a part of it, who have gone much further than their parents ever did. If most of the people in this chamber had grown up in the old world, they wouldn't be here. They certainly wouldn't be running businesses. In the old world, people were trapped doing what their parents did. What's made us different and special is that this is a place where it didn't matter what your parents did for a living. It didn't matter if they weren't connected or weren't famous. You could go as far as your talent and your work will take you. And if we lose that, we are going to lose what makes us special and different. And that's what we should be fighting about. And I think in some ways we are. I think we actually do have an agreement here. The agreement here is that the only solution to our problem is growing our economy. We can't tax our way out of this problem. We can't just cut our way out of this problem either. The only solution to this problem is to grow our way out of this problem. And I think we agree on that. And I hope the debate we're going to have is, how do you grow our way out of this? How do you create growth in the private economy? Do you allow government to spend as much as it wants until the growth starts to happen? That's what one side is arguing. Or do you embrace the principles of free enterprise and say, look, government has a role, but it has to be limited. And what we have to do is create an environment for the private economy to be incentivized to growth and to grow, and they'll do it. I want to have that debate. I want this budget to be that debate. And by the way, no one comes into this with clean hands. I'll criticize my own party on this. You don't build a $16.5 trillion debt by yourself. This is a bipartisan debt. Now, we've never seen anything like the last 4 years. I'll give you that. We've never seen anything like the last 4 years in terms of growing the debt. But there are Republicans that are complicit in this debt issue as well. We should be honest about that. We should also be honest that sometimes many in my own party have focused so much on the trees of debt that we've lost focus on the forest of growth. The reason why we should care about the debt is because it hurts growing our economy. And that's what the debate should be about growth. Let's have a debate here about how we can get our economy growing at least 4 or 4.5% a year so we can pull millions of people out of poverty, so we can pay down and stabilize our debt, so we can get people from the working class into the middle class and from the middle class and beyond. Let's have that debate. And let's argue what's the best way to create that growth. Is it through more government or more free enterprise? Let's have that debate. And for those on my side of the argument, I hope we can have that debate because I like our chances. I like what history has to say about it. I think we can prove that the only nations in the history of the world that have ever accomplished the kind of economic exceptionalism, the kind of middle-class prosperity that Americans want and expect and, quite frankly, deserve to have a chance to earn are the countries that follow the path of limited government, effective government, well-run government, but limited government, and free enterprise. And our country deserves to once and for all have that debate and stop hiding behind notions of, is this rich versus poor, those who have and those who have not. Let's have a debate about growth. If we can grow this economy, we can protect America, and it will make the world a better place as well. And I yield the floor.